Want to bring in Colorado Democrat Governor Jared Polis, also New Hampshire Republican Governor Chris Sununu. Good morning to you both.
Good morning.
Reaction from both of you. Let's just talk about the economic stuff first, or maybe we could even talk about the vibes of this campaign, if you will, in terms of how you thought that J.D. Vance, I mean, we were talking earlier, sort of went into this not the most loved. I don't know if you think he came out of this in a different place.
Well, look, I think those remarks you just played show the economic illiteracy of today's Republican Party. Traditionally, a party that supported trade and markets has taken a hard turn against free markets, the free exchange of goods across borders. You saw J.D. Vance doubling down on Trump's tariffs, 20% universal tariff. Devastating for our economy, increasing prices on a whole range of household goods by 20%. We just had back to school shopping, as many families did across the country. Everything we buy, backpacks, socks, shoes, all costing 20% more and really hitting the economy. That's what that plan means. Kamala Harris understands that we need to work with other countries. The concept of friend-shoring, of course, there's geopolitical complexities with China. Let's work with other countries in Southeast Asia, Thailand, Vietnam, of course, our friends in the hemisphere, Mexico, Canada. Let's expand trade relationships rather than contract them and drive towards a weaker, poorer America.
That sounds like traditional Republican values.
There you go.
Right?
No, look, I mean, if you want to get into the economics of the situation, there's one thing that every swing voter cares about: inflation, the cost of living. That's it. We can talk about this macroeconomic stuff and tariffs and trade and all that. At the end of the day, people just want to pay their rent. They want to buy groceries. And I think he hit that point home. And the difference between 4 years ago and today is stark. You can go back to the presidential debate where Kamala just absolutely refused to answer that question. Are people better off today than they were 4 years ago? She just completely avoided it. So on the economic
very simple. I mean, how does adding 20% to the cost of nearly every household good, all your kids' clothes, how does that decrease inflation or help anybody? It just decreases everybody's buying power, not to mention the jobs that would be destroyed directly, as well as the jobs that would be hit with retaliatory tariffs. American exports are great. We need to expand exports and expand imports. Trade is fundamentally good.
How do you answer the fundamental question about inflation during the last 4 years?
Well, look, I mean, inflation is coming down, and I think we need to continue that. The fact is that Donald Trump's budget would double the size of the deficit compared to Kamala Harris's budget. Deficit spending is a big driver of inflation and a big driver of mortgage interest rates.
But how do you answer the last 4 year question? It's a question that most Democrats struggle with.
Well, I mean, you know, again, inflation is coming down the right way. What's the question as to why we've had inflation in the last few years? It's a combination.
Well, the question is housing is up 60%. The question is people literally can't afford to go to McDonald's anymore. Like, well, that's the litmus test where everyone goes, this is screwed up. This is not the America we bought into 4 years ago.
And under Donald Trump, that gets worse with 20% tariffs on every household item. I think the solution on housing is simple. Let's not restrict supply. Let's allow housing to be built. Kamala Harris talks about 3 million new homes, removing paperwork, bureaucracy, regulatory reform to make it easier to build. These are the kinds of solutions we need. We're doing them at the state level in Colorado. Republican states like Montana are doing them. We need them nationwide to allow that housing to be built so living in America can be more affordable.
Inflation coming down means that prices are going up less quickly than before. So the 20% is already there, and now they're still rising 2.5%, 3%. So inflation is coming down, but you don't
want deflation either. That's it.
The 20% tariff is not there yet. That would be on top of what we have now.
But Trump was president for 4 years with tariffs, and we saw 1.9%.
He never got. This is new. This 20% deal. This is what he was on this time.
Because the tariffs he put on are still in place with the Biden administration. But we did not hit. We had 1.9% inflation under Trump.
Biden did unwind many of those tariffs. Not all of them. Not the Chinese solar ones. I've criticized him on that. I wish he did. But he absolutely unwound some of those punitive tariffs that Trump put in.
I think let's take a step back and go, well, what was the impact of last night, right? I think the impact was two things. I think they both did well. I think Tim did well. I think J.D. did very, very well, obviously. I mean, in terms of winning the debate, will it have an impact? Marginal. All right, there's probably only 6 or 7% of swing voters left out there. If anything, maybe I'll vote for Trump, but I don't know about this. A lot of folks were reassured that, hey, there's some real sanity here. There's some real thought process on policy here. This isn't just Trump and Trump light or anything like that. I think J.D. shored that up in a very, very strong way. I think Tim did that for Kamala as well, because I think Tim did better than Kamala did in her debate. So if anything, maybe there's a huge positive where America takes a big sigh of relief and goes, oh, wait, Right. The future in America is bright. We should be optimistic. There is opportunity here. Regardless of who's president, we do have real thinkers there that understand these policy issues, know how to implement, and do it the right way.
Let me ask you about two news headlines, one economic and one could become economic, we'll see, which is ports. How does this play into this election? And how do the Democrats respond? Meaning, do they support the folks and workers at the ports or not? I mean, everybody's I would say both sides are in an interesting box here.
First, it's going to drive inflation. I mean, it's going to drive costs. There's no question if this goes on. The Democrats are in a bit of a pickle because they're so pro-union. We're going to be pro-union. It's kind of thinking very old school in that mindset. The union just rejected a 50% pay raise. I don't know any American that would reject a 50% pay raise, but they have. So if that starts having a negative impact over the next month, it's going to be real.
Out there saying that
he doesn't have to. This is because Joe Biden and Kamala Harris run the White House. They should be the ones that need to intervene.
That these workers are run by a union that's actually trying to get former President Trump elected. You know that, too.
Well, but again, this is the administration's responsibility to go in. Pete Buttigieg, I mean, I love Gina Raimondo, but she was on, I think, this very show saying, oh, yeah, we're not even paying attention to what's going on with the potential, one of the biggest strikes in American history. So that's disconcerting in itself. You have the international stuff. Obviously, what we saw yesterday out of Iran is very destabilizing. I just don't think things are getting better over the next 5 weeks, per se, enough to where Kamala Harris can take credit for anything.
Well, once again, I think this shows the importance of trade, which Donald Trump would cripple with his 20% tariffs. I think Democrats have the moral standing with both sides, business and labor, to be able to get them in a room to hash out a deal. I think we'll have less strikes and less turmoil on the labor relations front.
Did you see what the head of the union said?
Well,
he basically wants to cripple this whole country.
Well, he's a Trump guy. I mean, look.
Did you see that?
Trump, I saw his remarks. This is the kind of thing
where shocking to you? We've got to play that video later in the program. I mean, that was beyond.
I mean, it's like Donald Trump wants to cripple border security too by not giving us the resources we need, the border patrol agents, to keep it. There's this theme among some in the Republican Party where they want to keep these issues festering in problems rather than solve them. So yes, for political reasons, that may be very well what he wants to do. And again, there's many issues that Donald Trump doesn't want to solve, but wants to keep out there, like a porous border that he can complain about.